2.1 Relations and Functions. The second part of that, where we're just going to review the basics of graphing linear equations. Talk about what the graph of a linear equation looks like, what's it made up of, what is a solution to a linear equation, and what's one way that will work to graph any linear equation. Let's face it, everybody's not 100% comfortable graphing linear equations. So we want you to have a way to fall back on that will always work. What is the graph of a linear equation going to look like? The word's right in there. It's going to be a line. What does it represent? It represents an infinite number of solutions to some equation. And remember, that idea of infinite number is important because that's why we put the arrows on the end of it. That's why in geometry we talked about segments versus lines. We could keep plugging in values all day. It's really just a bunch of dots all close together that are so close they form a line. You might have been had explained to you like that before, but maybe not. Same thing with circles, right? Circles are just collections of points. So when we look at an equation like this, what's one way that will always work to graph it? Well, we can just make a table and pick some values for x. We could have picked any values for x. I'm just going to pick a few because I know what it looks like. That's why I picked from left to right on the horizontal axis. And I'm just going to start plugging in values and seeing what I get. So I get -7 when x is -2. I get -3. So -3 when x is 0. And when x is 2, maybe you can already start to see the pattern that as x goes up by 2, y goes up by 4. And try to remember how that relates to our equation above. I'm not going to go into it right now. I'm going to graph this real quick. -2, -1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 0, -3, and 2, 1. And it would be a good idea, since our graph is so big compared to our little points, to actually come up with some more values for positive x values that are bigger. But that's the basic idea. I'll ask you to label your points because sometimes I just see people draw random lines. So I want to know what you actually use to graph it. If I see that you picked 3 points, then I'll know that you used a table. There's other ways we'll graph this in the future, that if you write other information, I'll know you graphed it some other way. So you can always fall back on this whenever we're graphing almost any kind of function, I guess. Definitely any linear function. You can fall back on just plugging in values and cranking out y values. Here's our recap. What does the graph of a linear equation look like? What really makes up that graph? What is the solution to a linear equation? How do we get them? It's probably a better way to say that. And what's one way that will always work to graph any linear equation?